Yo, 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 what's cracking, everyone? Today, I got a pretty straightforward video for you guys, and it's just going to be about four books that I'm a really big fan of. These are in no particular order. I just grabbed four books out of my little library that I think are pretty different from one another. So that way, anybody watching this will walk away with at least one book that piques their interest. Maybe not, of course, but that's what I think. And I've left timestamps for the video so that way, if you already know one of the books, already read them, already plan to read them, something of that sort, you could just skip ahead because I don't want to waste your time. So, the first book that I have for you guys today is going to be The Last Lecture by Randy Pausch. Randy Pausch, as you can see on the back here, I don't know if it's going to focus or not, but as you can see, he is a guy. He had and he was about 40 years old when he got cancer. He was terminally ill and he was going to die in 6 months or something of that sort. And so he ended up beginning to write this autobiography. And if I'm not mistaken, after his death, it was finished by people that he knew. He ended up pairing with people to get this thing done. And it's just a series of reflections that he had as he was learning how to cope with death, as he was learning how to accept his mortality. And, he had kids, so things that he wants to teach his kids, things that he thinks about and sees in a new light now that he's about to die. And overall, it's just a big reflection of his life, how he met his wife, how, his career went, all sorts of things, and everything that he learned in the short 40-something years that he was alive before he unfortunately passed away. This was one of the first books that I ever owned personally. It was given to me by my 12th grade English teacher, and I plan to reread it soon because I haven't read it since the 12th grade. But I remember I was a very big fan of the book, so that's the first one on the list. So the next book that I have on the list for you guys is going to be the Dhammapada. This is basically an introduction into Buddhism. And you don't need to be Buddhist in order to enjoy it, okay? I'm a Christian guy. I believe in Jesus. Yet I still am a big fan of this book. And I kind of view it in the same way as Meditations by Marcus Aurelius or any philosopher for that matter. And I think outside of the Bible and outside of belief in Jesus, there's a lot of knowledge to learn in different cultures, in different authors spread all throughout the world. And this is a prime example of that. If you plan to actually get into the Buddhist religion or if you want to know more about their culture, there are books way bigger than this, which I forget the name of, which really get into the weeds when it comes to Buddhism. They really teach you a lot about the religion and how it functions. I haven't read any of them. I've only read this, the Dhammapada, cover to cover. And this is essentially the most accessible introduction into Eastern thought, into Buddhist thought. That was a generalization, but into Buddhist thought in particular. It's kind of the most simple and straightforward teachings of the Buddha boiled down into a very digestible book, into a bunch of digestible chapters that can teach you quite a bit. And yeah, I think it's a valuable one to have on the list. And so if you are interested in philosophy, if you are interested in history, if you're interested in different cultures, this one could be for you. So the next book that I have on the list for you guys is going to be The Coddling of the American Mind: How Good Intentions and Bad Ideas Are Setting Up a Generation for Failure. This book right here covers a lot of topics. It's by Greg Lukianoff and Jonathan Haidt. And it essentially talks about the newest generation, Generation Z, essentially not Gen Alpha, because this book was written, I think, in 2018, a couple years ago. And it's a generation I am a part of. So it really hits home. I'm able to relate with a lot of what's going on in this book. And he's basically talking about what's occurring on college campuses in terms of speakers getting shut down, in terms of people having to watch what they say or else they're going to lose their job, mobs forming over speeches, over controversial ideas, things of that sort. How young people, or a lot of young people in America today, and I think he mentions in Europe as well, tend to be a little oversensitive, not even a little oversensitive. They tend to be oversensitive in a sense where someone challenging their beliefs, someone presenting them with an idea that they disagree with is grounds for violence, is grounds for action in terms of physical action, in terms of, creating mobs, and in terms of getting people, causing people to lose their jobs, literally. So he basically looks at what's happening, why is it happening, like what factors have led to my generation, Generation Z, being this way, being somewhat socially dysfunctional in terms of being able to face the outside world, in terms of being able to be an independent young adult, being able to face ideas they disagree with. He looks at what are the reasons for that, like what has caused it, and then in the end, he talks about what can we do to fix it, what can we do to mend the problem, both as a member of Generation Z, as a member of older generations who have parented us, and as for what we should do with our children when we eventually decide to have them. So yeah, really good book. It's a little bit of a difficult read because it's a long read, not that long, but it's bastante large, and it goes into a lot of detail about a lot of different current events. So it uses a lot of, big vocabulary, big words that I have never seen before. So it can get a little tough to read, but I would highly, highly recommend it if it's something that piques your interest. It is a real eye-opener, and it has some great ideas inside of it. And finally on the list, the last book I have for you guys is Brave New World by Aldous Huxley. This is one of my favorite books of all time. It's ahead of its time. It was written in 1931, I believe, or maybe published in 1931. And the author, Aldous Huxley, is incredible. It's a dystopian novel. It's a fiction book, a dystopian novel. And in the world that Huxley creates, it is set far into the distant future where humans are bred in laboratories and just kind of pumped out like a machine into the world. And from birth, they're set into this caste system. Actually, before birth, while they're being bred in these laboratories, they're set into this caste system where certain groups of people will be deteriorated as fetuses. And those are the people who work in the mines, for instance. And then other people will be a little bit deteriorated. They'll pour alcohol in their, in their bloodstream essentially to numb their brain, but not as much as the ones working in the mines. And those are the ones who are doing things like being cashiers, for instance. And then there's the top elite group, which are the ones who go through this birthing process unaltered. However, for everybody from birth, there is extreme social conditioning that takes place to make it so that way they don't like things like reading. They don't like things such as nature, the electric shock therapy, like some really gruesome stuff. But what this does is it creates a society where everybody is happy. And it creates a society where everybody is content with their role. The miners are content being miners because they only got half a brain. They don't want to do anything besides sit there swinging a pickaxe for 12 hours a day. It makes a society where the people on top are happy being on top because they're just grateful that they're not a miner, and because they're given a barrage of nothing but pleasure all of the time. They have access to a drug in the novel called soma, which is basically just a bunch of pleasure. It's like a drug with no downsides, and it just makes you feel really good. They have access to basically infinite promiscuity. Promiscuity is encouraged, it's celebrated, and it's considered weird to be monogamous or to have feelings for anybody. And technology as well. Technology is a big one as well, where they have access to all of this advanced technology at a whim, which they can use to be satisfied with their life. Essentially, they're just given as much pleasure as possible, so that way they don't use their intelligence, which they need in order to do their job in the society, to overpower the regime. And it's very interesting, and it's in contrast to the book 1984 by George Orwell, where it's super they're both very they're both super overbearing. But in 1984, it's much more overbearing, using force, using physical force, surveillance, things like that, power, oppression. Whereas in here, it's pleasure. Pleasure is the weapon being used to control the people. And it's a real eye-opener. It makes you think a lot about what's going on in our society, what's going on in the world. And it just reminds you what direction things can go. It's not a doomsday novel. It just tells you, stay on the lookout for these things and identify in which ways could you succumb to pleasure in a way that causes you to not achieve what your potential is, that causes you to be controlled? It really makes you think. And the novel is more than just that, because you end up following this one character who starts to kind of think a little bit differently, if you know what I mean. He starts to get some ideas, and he ends up going to a reservation where people still live in the old ways, which means having families, having religion, having books, things like that, having culture. He goes to this reservation and he encounters what life was like before the society. And everything that happens after that, I'm not going to spoil. You got to read the novel for yourself. But yeah, it's a very good one. Highly recommend it. One of my favorite books of all time. So yeah, that pretty much So yeah, guys, that pretty much concludes the video. I really hope y'all enjoyed it. I know I enjoyed making it. I hope it looks good. I got my little setup going. I got my microphone out. I'm really taking this one seriously. And I've been, I'm just excited to make this. I was sitting in my house. I was like, you know what? I want to talk about some books because I've been reading quite a bit lately. But I made sure to not choose books that are already all over the internet. Like, I read Atomic Habits recently, and I could have pulled out Atomic Habits and been like, this is a great book, guys. But if you guys read, you probably already know that. So I wanted to grab some books that were a little bit different that I still really enjoy. And I'm probably going to make more videos like this in the future. So yeah, hope y'all got something out of this, and I will see y'all next time.